Now, this goes to an area of very interesting study. You could do a workshop on every single point here, but I'm just going to introduce it to you so you're aware of it if you're not already aware of this. The kind of historical critique that has been applied to the Bible for the last 200 years or so, we are now applying to the Quran. We're applying to the life of Muhammad. We are applying to the whole traditional story of Islam. Because you see, when you look at the traditional story of Islam, it makes claims about what happened in history. But when you compare it to history, the archaeological record, documentary record, manuscript evidence, and so on, the two are saying two very different things. History says one thing, and the traditional story of Islam says another. Whilst if you apply the same questions to the Bible stands up strong and is able to answer the critics and can be supported by the historical record. And for those of you who ever come to London, Sarah and I do a tour of, and Hatun at the back there, of the Bible in the British Museum, where we look at the documentary, manuscript, and archaeological artifacts that support and corroborate the biblical record. So where our Bible stands up, the Quran falls on its face. So we know that all the stories that we have of Muhammad, they were written about 200 years after he died. And we now know, according to what the historical record is showing, that Islam most likely started 60 years after Muhammad's death. That Muhammad might not have had anything to do with the religion of Islam. I'll put that out to you because this is a fantastic new area of studies. It's very, very insightful as to what actually happened at the beginnings of Islam. Then we have a claim by Muslims who say that the Quran is perfect, it's never been changed. How many of you have heard this claim? And almost every Muslim around the world will make that claim. The difficulty is manuscript evidence shows something different. So we have 6 earliest manuscripts. They all say they don't agree. They are different, and they are different from the Quran you use today. And then Hatun and others around the world have found and discovered more than 26 different Arabic Qurans still existing today that don't agree with one another. So the Quran is not perfect and unchanged. It is very different. It has been changed. Now, I want to look a little bit at the concept of Allah, but also Isa. Where did Allah come from, and where did Isa come from? You see, they say Isa is Jesus. That's what everyone believes. And in fact, when you look at the Turkish New Testament, the Arabic New Testament, you'll see Isa in there. Certainly in the Turkish New Testament, you have Isa in there. And many of Christians, when they refer to this person, Jesus, they refer to Isa. But is Isa Jesus? Very important question. Where did Isa come from? Well, we know in Arabic, the way you say Jesus, or let's say Yeshua, God says, very important. God's name is in all of that, Yeshua. The way you say in Arabic is very similar to how you say it in Hebrew. Hebrew and Arabic are very similar in that. And we know that the oldest Arabic translation of the New Testament that we have in existence today is found in St. Catherine's Monastery in Mount Sinai. It uses the term Yeshua. It does not use Isa. So Yeshua is in Arabic New Testaments 200 years approximately after Muhammad came and died. So where does Isa come from? And why on earth do Christians use Isa today? You see, when you look at Isa, it starts with the Quran. Isa starts with the Quran. It has no historicity. We can't find it before the Quran. Yeshua, we know, was used a few hundred years after the Quran was supposedly written down in the Arabic New Testaments. That's what our earliest record is saying. What's more, when you read the stories of Isa, you don't recognize them. How many of you have read the stories of Abraham, Ibrahim, Musa, Moses, Dawood, David, and so on, Suleiman, Solomon in the Quran and thought, oh, I don't recognize these stories? How many of you have read the stories of Isa and thought, oh, I don't recognize these stories, especially the denial of his divinity? Don't recognize those. You say, where on earth does this come from? Well, you apply source criticism, i.e., Muslims say this came from God. Well, let's look at history and see if that's true. Because the stories that are in here that borrow the names from Jewish text is not the same stories, and the stories of Isa you don't find in the Quran. So, but we do know where they came from. And there's many different sources, but I'll give you just 2. So, for example, in Surah 3 verse 49 and chapter 5 110, you have Jesus breathing. He's made a clay bird and he breathes life into it. We know that this comes from the 2nd century infancy gospel of Thomas. This is heretical writing, most likely Gnostic type writing. So we find the kinds of stories that are in the Quran begin to come from sources that begin to appear in the second half of the 2nd century, up until about the 7th. Take the story of Isa by a palm tree, and suddenly a stream appears and looks after Isa and his mother Mary. We see that in chapter 19 of the Quran and chapter 3 verse 46. We know that this was taken from the 6th century Syriac infancy gospel. So these late Gnostic gospels, heretical gospels, that's the source of the stories of Isa in the Quran, not the Bible itself. And these stories deny the divinity of Jesus. These Gnostic gospels deny who Jesus is. It denies the historical Jesus. It's fascinating when you see it all begin to fit together. And always at the back of your mind begin to think, oh, same God? Same concept of Jesus, same person. Always have these questions at the back of your mind. So we know that the Isa, who they claim is Jesus, comes from his heretical sources that are in the Quran. And we also know that the Quranic Isa denies his divinity. That means it's not the same person of the Bible. It's not the same God. Because Jesus is God manifest clearly to us. That all of the divinity dwelt within him. If you know Jesus, you know the Father. And yet the Quran denies this.
Jesus Christ is the only way, the truth, and life. The only way to the Father is through Jesus. If you don't know Jesus, you don't know God. Come to Christ today. Come to Jesus today. He can save. He can heal. He's there for you. Come to Jesus.